Well, good evening, Aletheia Church, and I hope you are enjoying your time in gospel community this afternoon or this evening whenever you guys are meeting. I just want to take a second here to talk to you guys for a moment, recapping our sermon from this past Sunday, which was entitled Empowered to Have a Testimony. What I had said at the beginning of that sermon is that we have been slowly working our way through Acts chapter 9 over the course of the last 3 weeks, and that the breakdown of that would be that the first week gave us a little bit of the backstory to Saul's life before his conversion to being a follower of Jesus. That last week, we got to witness the transformation and conversion of Saul into becoming a follower of Jesus. And that this week on, anytime we see Saul in the book of Acts, we are going to see that as his life post-conversion and what he is up to in the life of the church. And so one of the things I did at the beginning of my sermon was trying to help us understand this idea of understanding Saul's life as a testimony to Jesus instead of a biography, and understanding that a testimony in reality is far different than a biography, because a testimony is witnessing to the truthfulness of something. Specifically, in Saul's case, the truthfulness that Jesus is who he said he was. And then we saw as we worked through the text that there was 4 key things that we could draw out that were key parts of Saul's own testimony. That first one that we see is, what was his life like before he followed Jesus? And we see in Saul's life that his life is self-centered and self-serving. And we asked ourselves that same question about, in our own testimonies, what would it look like for us to be able to share with somebody what our life looks like before we knew Jesus? Then the second thing we see is that Saul shares with us, or more importantly, Luke shares with us how Saul's view of Jesus changed when he became a believer. And we talked about the importance of Saul using language like Son of God or the Christ to discuss Jesus, because it meant that Saul believed some very important and specific things about Jesus and what he came to do. I will allow your gospel community leaders to go in more depth on that, but we also talked about in our sermon the importance of understanding who Jesus said he was and following him and worshiping him as such. Then we talked about how Saul's life changed and what his life looked like after he began to follow Jesus, and how that in fact was a testimony as well, and that the primary marker of Saul's life was that he suffered well for the glory of God and to witness to Jesus. We talked about how life change, both in transformation about what we love and the things that we do, can also lead to a greater worship of Jesus and allow us to testify as to how Jesus has changed our lives and why others should follow him as well. Then the last thing we talked about is, what does it look like to still follow Jesus? Or to ask the question a different way, why do you still follow Jesus? And what we saw from Saul's life and the lives of so many of those in the early church here in Acts chapter 9 is that they had a peace that went beyond understanding. They were being built up as a body together. As they received persecution, they encouraged one another, that they walked in fear of a sincere love for God, and that they were comforted by the Holy Spirit as their churches grew. And so tonight in gospel community, my goal and my prayer for you is that you will share your testimonies with one another, that you will encourage one another to be encouraged by your own testimonies, and that in that you will be encouraged to share with your one what God has done in your life and what you believe he wants to do in theirs as well. I love you guys. I'm praying for much fruit to be born from these conversations. Go and be the church this week. God bless.